Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I want to say a special thank you to those who subscribe and who comment and like in the comment section. It is much appreciated. I love the feedback. And I know that a lot of you like to follow the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell case, but I figured since there's a lull in the case, I would go over an older case. And it just so happens that on the USA Network, they have the Betty Broderick Story, and I rebooted, and I thought, I'm there. So I'm going to cover that today. First caveat, it's thundering and it's storming really bad here, so you might hear some noise. I hope the power doesn't go out. Second caveat, my nails are janked up because I scrubbed the pavers with bleach today, so forgive my hands. And third, again, this is just my opinions on a series that's on the USA Network, so please don't take anything here as any kind of fact per se. This is a series, so of course they've taken dramatic license with the facts, but I do know some things about this case. Hell Hath No Fury, the Betty Broderick Story. I watched the court TV when they aired some of the stuff on her murder trial. I read The 12th of Never, another book on the series. I've seen the Betty Broderick, I think it was Lifetime with Meredith Baxter Burney. I think she just goes by Meredith Baxter. But I saw that I don't know how many times. I saw the Oprah Winfrey interview. I've seen her parole hearings. So I got a little background on this. So that's all the caveats out of the way. And with all that crap out of the way, let's get into it. On November 5th, 1989, Elizabeth Ann Broderick killed her ex-husband, Daniel T. Broderick III, and his new wife of 7 months, Linda Colcana Broderick, in the bed of his Marston Hills home. This isn't a whodunit, it's a whydunit. And the series tries to let you know, tries to explain to you why Betty Broderick killed her ex-husband and his new wife. This series should be called Dirty Dan, not Dirty John, the Betty Broderick Story, because it is slanted towards Betty's viewpoint. It makes Dan look dirty. It does. I cannot imagine how Daniel Broderick and Linda Colcana's family feel about this series, because, just about the time that, I guess it's Lifetime, quit airing the Betty Broderick Story, the 2 movies they made on that, then you get this, it's like, and granted, I enjoyed this. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it, but I am saying I recognize that it's slanted. I think this series aired June 2020, so just so you know, I think it's still available. I did purchase it because I don't have the USA Network. Adult Betty Broderick is played by the actress Amanda Peet, and the adult Dan Broderick is played by Christian Slater. And I just want to say that no one is going to top Meredith Baxter's rendition of Betty Broderick. No one. That's classic. That was on point. No one is going to top that. Amanda Peet is easy on the eyes, okay? And it's really hard to make her look ugly. You know what I mean? You can make her look less glamorous, and you can make her look a little less wow, but you can't really make her Betty Broderick, really. And the Christian Slater character, and Christian Slater does a Dan that you just want to slap. He's got a real slappable, smug manner, and I guess he does Dan on point for their purposes. Episode 1 starts off, you're in La Jolla, California, January 1986, and Dan is selling their marital home in Coral Reef. Betty and Dan's, all right? Let me just say, this story is not told in a linear timeline where you can make sense of how things really played off. It is told out of order in a manner to keep you as off-footed as Betty felt. You feel like so confused. I know this story, and so I can sit there and watch it and know what they're doing when they're going back and forth in time, but it is unsettling for the viewer, And it serves to just kind of further enhance how unsettled Betty felt. Because you're going back in time and you're always thinking, you know, this is how things are and this is how things were. So it's like always comparing things, and you start feeling a little crazy. You start off in La Jolla, January 1986, with Dan selling their marital home in Coral Reef. The legal papers, which would be the closing statement, need to be signed by Betty, but she's in her car with her attorney. She's stalling. She doesn't want to go up inside the office and to sign the papers and sell the only marital asset with her name on it. And he's telling her, this is happening, Betty. You know, this is happening. It's really happening. But she stalls. And so she fails to sign the closing statement. And the series goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth like this. It's building the tension and the crazy making. Maybe so you can understand where Betty was coming from. Then they have a cut scene. They show her parents in her La Jolla home. This is the home that she bought with Dan as a teardown because the view was great. Okay, this is what she thinks, right? So she's living in her La Jolla home, and her parents are there visiting, and they're bitching about the house. You know, they're going like, her father's like, soggy wallpaper marron, you know. I guess he's Italian. And her father's a building contractor, and so he's like looking around the place. You know, the place is, he calls the whole place a boondoggle, and he's talking about how the floors are soft and things like that. But they were supposed to get this place as a teardown, allegedly. And so her parents are being critical of the place, and without explicitly saying it, what the series is implying is that her parents aren't really emotionally that supportive of her. Okay, that's what this series implies. And this series is as campy as the other one. I know you shouldn't make serious topics campy. It's a murder. 2 people were killed and there are countless victims. The kids, the families. But guys, this is campy. If you want to sit and get your popcorn on a Sunday and watch it and have a few laughs between the seriousness, it'll happen because, you know, just the 80s fashion is campy as hell. You've got the big jewelry, the diamond tennis bracelets, the bright clothes. You've got Betty wearing Chanel and Versace and Yves Saint Laurent and Oscar de la Renta, and, you know, the puffy shoulders and the makeup and the hair and the soundtrack that's accompanying many of these scenes. The soundtrack accentuates the point of the scene. So if you were to fail to get the point of the scene that they were trying to get across, all you'd have to do is listen to the title song of the soundtrack that's playing, and then you're going to get it. You know, you spin me right round like a record, baby, right round. You know what I mean? Like, you make me crazy. This kind of stuff. It's campy, guys. I see you. I see you at USA Network. I see you being campy. February 4th, 1986. Betty is getting pissed that Dan has sold their Coral Reef home. And she tries to confront him at his Marston Hill house. So he's bought a house in Marston Hills. And she wants to talk to Dan about the selling amount, because at this point she's not represented. So she doesn't even know the selling amount. She hasn't signed the paper. Okay? So we don't even know. So how can he sell the house without my consent? This is how she's coming from it. Like, you couldn't have done it legally. How could this have happened? Dan tells her to get the heck out of there. You know, you're in violation of the court order. Get off my property. So what does she do? She goes and she tries to burn down the Coral Reef house, right? That's campy, guys. I'm sorry. She's splashing the gasoline around, tries to light it, and apparently nothing happens. Like, it just burns a tiny little thing. Nothing happens. So what does she do? She gets in her big old truck, and it's got these, the custom license plate is load 'em up, right? Because, like, load the kids up. She gets in her truck and she drives it into the front door of his Marston Hills home. Now, granted, it doesn't do a huge amount of structural damage, but that's intense, you know? So what he does is he comes running out and he pulls Betty from the truck and he wrestles her down to the ground and he pins her down, and even, like, in the facts of the case, he punches her in the chest, which, you know, I totally, you know, she was out of control. So they don't bring that up, but he punches her in the chest. And 911 is called, I don't know by who. Could have been one of the kids in the house, could have been one of the neighbors, because this was a scene. And she's committed. He has her committed because he's telling the police in this series that he's a doctor, right? And that they're separated, and that he has an order of protection against her, and that he's almost like her attending physician. He doesn't say that, but he's like, I don't have admitting, privileges at that hospital, but you let me know where she lands, like I'm a doctor and and he has her committed. Now, to step back, would the police in any situation have probably had somebody committed? Yeah. We didn't need the Dan adding the bit about him being a doctor and all this stuff. Betty gets committed for her behavior. And during her 72-hour hold, which is typical for commitment, Betty speaks to a psychiatrist at the mental health hospital. And she tells the doctor the reoccurring theme of this series that Dan Broderick never loses. Dan Broderick never loses. And Betty is shown to be impulsive. Hello, she tried to burn the house down, the one that they were selling. She drove her car into the front of his house while they were inside. And she insists, that was a crazy thing, but I'm not crazy. Yeah, I see that was a crazy thing, but I'm not crazy. So this is how we start the series. Betty's parents, they're sitting there. She's calling from the mental health hospital. And they're scolding her over the phone about plowing the truck into his front door. And they're saying, like, how could you do that? You shamed yourself, Betty Ann. And, when you shame yourself, you shame us. So she's getting shamed. So out of the hospital, Betty revisits the incidents in the middle of a grocery store with her friends. I mean, just like it's nothing. Like they see her down the aisle, hey, how you doing, Bets? And she's like, well, Dan had me committed, and you're just like, what? This is campy. Sorry, it's funny. It's funny the way she puts it and how they frame these scenes. Sorry, it is. So she just blabs it all out in the middle of the grocery store about what Dan did, how he had her committed, and now she's got to buy some cornflakes or whatever it is because she's been in the bin for 3 days. So her lawyer is calling her about the $10,000 retainer, because he hasn't been paid. And Dan insists that Betty pay the retainer for her own lawyer so that she will be invested in what's happening. And I just want to say it is typical. If you have a working spouse and a non-working spouse, especially one that makes a lot of money and one that has sat there in bed and the housewife, and you want the divorce, it is typical for the spouse to be charged for both attorney's fees, for his own and the other, especially when he's an attorney himself. It's really no skin off his nose. But anyway, especially when they make this amount of money. They're rich. But he refuses to pay her 10 grand retainer for the attorney fee because he wants her to be invested in what's happening. So Dan's divorcing her, and she doesn't want the divorce. She's dragging her feet, and she's saying in the series, it's not my idea, and I don't pay for things I don't want. She doesn't pay for things she doesn't want. So Dan thinks that by contacting Betty's parents, like while she was in the mental hospital, that it would be helpful to her. I guess he thought they'd stick around when she came out. And again, this is just all in the series. It probably didn't pan out like this. But allegedly, they simply watch over her kids while she's in the mental hospital because I guess he had to work. And so then once she got out, they left town. And then we see Dan showing sympathy to Betty because of that. Like, I guess he thought that they would be there for her, but they scooted off. There's a great scene of her eating with her girlfriends at a seaside restaurant. You can tell it's an expensive restaurant and that they're always frequenting this restaurant. And the girlfriends, they all have the big hair and the big gold jewelry and the pearls, for lunchtime. And they're telling Betty to get new interests, meet new people, get a job. They're giving her all this advice, right, of what to do. So Betty's divorce is being bifurcated, or Dan wants it to be bifurcated. And that's wherein one can be officially divorced and then work out the property settlement later. In other words, you could have divorce and property, and then you get it bifurcated and you get the divorce like the next day, and then they'll work out the property settlement later. That's one thing. If you have two parties and they're both working and they both have income, to do it this way where you divorce and then work out all the divorce money factors later because both parties can still manage during the time period. But that's not the case here. Not at all. He is a med mal attorney and she's a housewife supporting the med mal attorney. To bifurcate, I think, in my opinion, the bifurcation started, it even made it worse. It made Betty even crazier because once he got physically divorced, then he could go off and do whatever he wanted to do. And then he's holding the purse strings on top of all of it. So it just made her nuttier and nuttier and nuttier. Her attorney quits due to non-payment because no attorney's going to work for free. And Betty doesn't want to use the allotted money that Dan's giving her through this bifurcated proceeding. He's giving her $9,000 a month. Now you might think, oh my God, $9,000. Okay, listen, it's California. She owes half of that to this mortgage on this teardown house that now is her house that wasn't really her main house, but she's in this La Jolla house, and it's what, $4,000 a month at least for the mortgage. And so she's left with the rest of the money to pay for all her crap. Could she have paid for her own attorney? Hell yeah, she could have. She absolutely could have, but she didn't want it. She didn't want the divorce, so she was dragging her feet. So Betty gets a job at an art gallery. So she's trying to do something for herself, and she tries to also get a new attorney. And she asks one of her attorney friends to represent her. And not surprisingly, many of their friends are also attorneys or attorneys' wives or whatever. They're in the field, and they all turn her down. She ends up asking a whole bunch of people, and they all turn her down for various reasons, like conflicts of interest with Dan, no experience in the field, afraid of Dan. You know, basically they all turn her down. So she's having a hard time finding an attorney. So Betty finds out that the kids have been placed in therapy, and most people would be okay with the fact or happy that their kids have been placed in therapy during a contentious divorce, but not Betty, because she alleges that Dan has been telling the kids that she's crazy and that the kids are afraid of her now. You know, so she's not happy. So Betty goes off and she starts leaving these really horrible messages on his answering machine. And for those of you who don't know, you used to have landlines in your house. You didn't have a cell phone. And you'd have an answering machine for when you didn't pick up. And she started leaving these really horrible messages on the answering machine. Since Betty didn't have consistent counsel, she misses a scheduled court hearing. And we see in the series Dan's ho-hoing it up with the judge and his own attorney, because he does have an attorney. He's obviously not a fool. And they're in the courtroom telling more stories, you know, and Betty fails to show up. So they proceed without her. So what Dan gets is he gets the bifurcated judgment that he requests. He gets legal and physical custody of his kids, of his children, which is actually a big deal. He gets the ability to assess the marital assets, like with his accountant. He gets the ability to assess the marital assets. Think about that. Just ask the fox how many hens are in the hen house. You get what I'm saying? Eee! That causes concern. You know, you have a very naive housewife. And she's smart, but she's naive, you know? And then you have an attorney who's going to be valuing all their assets. You think he's going to be fair? So then the show switches to after the murder, so post-arrest, and Betts is talking about how divorce is the closest thing to war, and that she's amazed it only took one bullet to kill Dan Broderick. Betty seems to think that Dan is just some formidable character. And then we go to episode 2. The series, like I said before, goes back and forth in time to keep the viewer as off balance as Betty. And we're shown Betty's upbringing, her early years. Usually the chapter 2 or the episode 2 does that, right? You have excitement in the first episode, and the second one will be the backstory. So we see her Catholic education. We see that she's a sharpshooter. I really don't think she was a sharpshooter in real life, but we see that she's shooting guns. She's familiar with these rifles. She gets her period, and her mother basically tosses the feminine hygiene products at her, you know, with little explanation or, you know, care. It's very odd. So we also see her obtaining the last silver spoon in her serving set. And it looks like Tiffany. I don't know if it was, but I mean, you get the impression that she's real naive and that, you know, she's got a strong middle class upbringing, that she was raised Catholic, and that she's probably a virgin. Then we switch to Notre Dame, 1965. We're in South Bend, Indiana. At a bar, she meets Dan Broderick, who introduces himself as Daniel T. Broderick III, MDA, and she asks him what the A stands for, and he says medical doctor almost, and tells her that he's been accepted to Cornell Medical School. So think, 1965 is the year they met, all right? They dated for 4 years. So not only were they married for a long time, they also dated for a long time. So they knew each other pretty darn well when they got married. Dan and Betty are shown dancing to what would become their favorite song, The 12th of Never. And it's almost like a country song, but it also sounds Irish. I'm not sure about the backstory of The 12th of Never. But Dan keeps asking Betty to marry him, and she agrees. And later Betty declares that Dan had always, once he set eyes on her, decided that she was going to be the one to marry him. Like, he was, I guess, obsessive, and he just saw her and said, that's the one, and that was the one. He got what he wanted. He always wins. He got what he wanted. They began a long distance relationship. This series doesn't go into it, but Betty, she graduated from school, and she wanted to graduate from college before she married. 4 years later, April 12th, 1969, the couple marries in Westchester, New York, in a church, as good Catholics do, and Betty's mother is shown having an absolute fit that Dan isn't wearing the formal morning dress jacket. I guess probably has tails or something. And so Dan doesn't want to wear a rented suit. And so he opts for a different suit and tie and stuff, and Betty's mother becomes enraged. It's funny. I mean, she calls it unconscionable, and she predicts that this shows like what Dan is really like. He has no thought to the wedding party, like that it would be not harmonious with what everybody else is wearing. And she says, like, what wouldn't a man like that do? Because he wouldn't wear the formal wedding coat. So Betty gets pregnant on their honeymoon, as good Catholics do, and works until the first child's birth. So until the day that she gives birth, she's working. She's a trooper. She's family oriented. And this is the kind of stuff that the series is going to drive into your mind. The time flips back to the murder trial, because we're going to show you this is what it was like. This is what it's like now. And Betty's calling a friend on a payphone after shooting Dan. And the friend is called to the stand and at the murder trial. And the friend basically says that she didn't call the police after listening to the hysterical Betty, because Betty was blabbing and carrying on, and that, Betty had said before, that she would kill Dan, and she just didn't even believe that Betty was even telling the truth. So that goes to show you what kind of mental state she was in. That you could sit there and call your friend crying saying, I killed him. I shot the son of a bee, or whatever she said, and that they didn't even think it was real. We flip back to the past to a very pregnant Betty taking on extra jobs to keep the electricity on. She's having babies. She's losing babies. She had 9 pregnancies and only 4 children, if that gives you any idea. So she is a real trooper. And we see Dan buying custom-made doctor's white lab coats with his name embroidered on it. And, when he gets 3 so that Bets doesn't have to spot clean the coats overnight. Bets, that's what he calls her, Bets. Their purse strings are pretty tight, but he still manages to get 3 custom-made lab coats but he does it so that Bets doesn't have to do all the spot treating at night. Yeah, so anyway, after obtaining his degree and starting work as a doctor, we see Dan becoming quickly dissatisfied as a doctor and claims that he is suffocating, leaving him little weekend free time, so he gets accepted to law school, and he thinks that he'll be able to spend more time with his family as a medical malpractice attorney. And I put laugh out loud on my notes because, he talks about how, attorneys don't have emergencies and attorneys aren't on call and all this stuff. And you just go, oh, summer child. Oh, you sweet summer child, right? He argues the point to Betty of having an MD and a JD, and he talks about how Harvard's already accepted him. I felt like, oh, well, you know, boy, you consult her, don't you? So he asked, you know, what's better, Bets, rich or richer? And of course, what do you think she's going to say? Betty keeps on having babies, and she wishes to have her tubes tied or to have an abortion because she is suffering. It shows her throwing up. It shows her bleeding her veins. She's got varicose veins, and she's like actually bleeding. She's hemorrhaging. And she has some troubles, and Dan realizes that he's been terribly busy, and he promises to be there for her. He's always making promises to be there for her, by the way. And she even loses one baby while he's off schmoozing, according to this series. Schmoozing is really important. We see another scene where Dan is coming in kind of happy drunk, while Betts is in bed trying to get a baby down to sleep. And he's telling her how schmoozing is just as important as the law, okay? And that the law is a mental battlefield, and that you define your adversaries, and you never negotiate until you're sitting on their chest. And how best do you get on their chest? Well, you get in their head first. So this is the kind of stuff he talks about, you know. And so to Betty, Dan is seen as a formidable opponent. I just don't think she ever thought she was going to be his opponent. So after law school, Dan works as an associate in a big firm in California. And so they've moved to California, and Betty makes buddies with the wives, as you do when you go to one of these firms and you try to network and things. And by 1978, Betty supports Dan striking out on his own. Now keep in mind, they met in 65, they married in 69. By 1978, Dan now wants to leave the firm he's working with as an associate and strike out on his own. So he opens his own practice, and good trooper Betty decorates his law office. So she's in there, she's pitching in where she can, she's having babies, you know, she's raising these kids, she's getting them off to the practices, she's doing everything but working at that darn law office and making that money. But everything else is getting done by her. They keep talking about image, confidence, success. This is their motto as like a married couple. Image, confidence, success. And she's always telling him, like, you can do anything, Dan, you can do anything. She's building him up, but at this point you're seeing they're enmeshed. This couple is enmeshed. At least she's enmeshed to him. And he is to her, but I just don't think, maybe according to this series, he appreciates it. How his other half is holding down the damn fort. He says, quote, if we pull this off, there won't be a doctor in town that'll want us as a patient. And just so turns out, then the series shows you Betty is having a baby, and she's having to have a C-section because the doctor's too afraid to take any risks. So, yeah, Dan Broderick's name is getting around that, you know, you don't want to screw up because he's the med mal attorney that's going after everybody. Betty gets her tubes tied after that last baby, and we see her asking Dan, you know, his opinion on the matter because they're good Catholics. And he replies real distractedly. He's like looking through papers. He's barely paying attention to her, right? And he replies, you know, if that's what you want, Bets. And that's where you see in the series where she's like, uh-oh, something's changing, right? Something is amiss here because he wasn't like that before. We see Betty guiding her friends through their cheating husbands and their divorces and things like that. And I call them the lunch bunch because you commonly see her with these ladies. These are attorneys' wives and her friends at these fancy eateries out, you know, on the beach looking out at the ocean with the white linen tablecloths, and they're always eating lunch and they're just glammed completely out. So she's with these lunch bunch friends and she's always guiding them through their problems, right? And now she's going to have a problem. So she's guiding them, nursing them through their husband's midlife crisis and stuff like that. And they're always like, oh, you're so lucky, Betty. But is she? Because now things are going to get hairy. And it flips to the State versus Broderick was State versus Betty Broderick, and Carrie Wells as the prosecutor. You see the courtroom discussion of the crime. Okay, so now they're going to start telling the audience, saying, how she fired 5 shots into the sleeping couple, and 2 went into Linda and 1 went into Dan, and or 2 went in, they're breaking it down about the bullets and the trajectories and stuff like that. Now, she wasn't lucky. So then you cut to episode 3, and you see a young Dan debating in law school, and he's justifying lying, and he's talking about how, quote, in the right circumstances, lying serves a greater good. Oh, Lord, what are you setting us up for, USA, right? So one of Dan's attorney buddies wants a divorce. So I think this is about the time that he is either an associate or when he first struck out on his own. So they go back in time, and they show Dan and his friend, and the buddy is talking about wanting a divorce. And of course, his wife is one of Betty's friends, one of her best friends. And Dan's buddy is getting all kinds of pre-divorce advice and strategy in place before he even lets the wife know that he's even dissatisfied, right? So the clueless wife is encouraged to follow her dreams and to be made independent and all this stuff. But the husband, meanwhile, is getting his Epstein credits planned, whether to pay this or that bill ahead of time before talking to the wife, to accelerate the major credit card purchases, to pay the kids' therapy in advance, to change the beneficiary designation with Social Security, to establish the legal date of separation to their favor, right? And this is all planned before even talking to the wife about being dissatisfied for the date to separate. This is the kind of legal strategies that they're planning. So the husband, who are lawyers, they're shown disassembling their marriages. In this case, this buddy's marriage. And then the wives are shown at these lunches trying to fix the marriages and to reconcile the marriages. So you see the dichotomy there. It flips back into time, and Dan is shown in law school, and everybody's making a study group. And in your first year of law school, you get in a study group, and it's important. It helps you so much. But Dan insists that he is, quote, used to working alone. He's going to be the lone wolf. He doesn't need the study group. And instead, he's really using Betty as a study group. So you see him going home, and he's using Betty. Betty's, using the flashcards and helping Dan. And also she's typing up his briefs. So, yeah. So then Dan is shown starting up his own firm. Again, they're letting you know that he works alone. He doesn't have associates. He's using an office pool receptionist, and he's typing his own stuff, So he's a lone wolf, he can do this by himself. So by the 1980s, Betty and Dan are living a finer lifestyle. They're going out to the nice restaurants now that he's hitting the gong. And what we're told that means is he's getting $1 million settlements. And if you're on a contingency fee basis of 33%, 33 and a third, that's a large chunk of change. So now he's hitting the gong. They're starting to go out to the really ritzy restaurants. And he gets contact lenses to make himself more appealing and dapper. Now think, this is a guy that's kind of like got Coke bottle glasses and sideburn mutton chops and stuff, an intellectual type of guy, and now he's starting to get more suave and dapper. They continue this fine living, but Betty always brings up the past. Like, she brings up the fact that life was difficult before, that they were on food stamps, and how difficult it was to get by. Like, she's appreciating the present, but she's bringing it up like, do you remember that? And he doesn't want to hear about them ever being on food stamps. He doesn't want her telling people that they were ever on food stamps. So Dan sees his attorney friend, the one that they navigated through the legal waters, and the guy is getting married to a young trophy wife, right? He wants to get remarried, and Betty gets the invitation, and she insists that nobody from their social group is going to go to this, to this second marriage to this young chippy, because she's loyal to her friend and all that, right? Betty's all disgusted, and she's shown to be valuing the sanctity of marriage and doesn't believe that this should be happening. But the other wives end up going to the wedding, and Betty doesn't go, but Dan goes, So this like is setting the scene that what she finds unacceptable and what Dan seemingly finds acceptable. So at church, Betty sees a flyer for a marriage encounter. That's like one of those seminars that you got, like a weekend thing that you could go to and sit with the different people and talk about your marriage and how you can fix it and write letters to each other about, your promises and this and that. And we know, looking back, that this really happened in 1976. So if you want to dial back to when maybe the first hint of trouble in the marriage, we'd say 1976. So she convinces Dan to go because she says, something's happening. Something's happening with us. You don't smell my hair anymore. You don't bring me flowers. You don't smell my hair anymore, And so he agrees to go, but he admits that he doesn't even believe in the church anymore. And, I just was like, oh, Satan's got him. He doesn't believe in the church anymore, He says, it's all just a show to me now, like the church. But he attends to the encounter to appease Bets. And questions and answers are posed in the marriage encounter, and then letters are written. And Betty's letter feels that they have a lack of closeness and communication. And she naively thinks that if they were to get a couch and snuggle at night at the end of the day and talk about their problems, that it would fix everything. And Dan's letter basically says that everything he does is in preparation to be successful. And he puts his relationships last. And that, he'd try to do better. The soundtrack to the next scene is Cyndi Lauper's Money Changes Everything. Just to give you an idea of how the soundtrack really adds to this series. They switch to Dan bitching at Betty about a credit card bill that's come in. But it turns out that the biggest expense that month on that bill was Dan's fancy bespoke tailored shirts. Ooh, yeah, it's like money changes everything. So Dan starts calling himself the Count de Money. Like, that's what he nicknames himself, Count de Money. And at an event, Betty overhears him telling another man, oh, that new girl is just so beautiful. She's so beautiful. And so it's 1982, and Betty questions him, like, who's so beautiful? Because Dan has shown himself to be this really nerdy, intellectual guy, not a womanizer, okay? Not a womanizer. So you can say a lot of stuff about Dan. You can say he's arrogant, he's this, that, and the other, right? But he's not a womanizer. And Betty says that Dan doesn't call any woman beautiful, and that she's automatically suspicious. Now she's like, whoa, what's going on? What's going on with him? He's got his contact lenses in, he's got a tux and a top hat and a cape, and now he's calling other women beautiful. What's going on? They've been married 14 years at this point, and she smells a rat. Betty goes to the office after asking him who was beautiful, and he's like, oh, just some girl with her name starts with an L. I don't know. She's the office receptionist, the office pool receptionist. So Betty goes to the office to eyeball this new girl, right? Her name's Linda. And she's shocked. She is shocked to see a younger carbon copy of herself. And so, the way she looked when she married Dan. And I'm going to just give you a picture to show you how similar they even were later on. This is at a lawyer's dinner. The top picture is Betty and Dan, and the bottom picture is Linda and Dan. So Betty goes to the office to eyeball this girl, as you do, right? And, she's shocked. She sees herself 20 years before, and she gets rattled. It's 1983, and at a private country club, they're at the beach. Dan is dissatisfied. He's dissatisfied with his life. He's just not a happy camper. And he tells Betty that he did hire an assistant. And Betty asks him, oh, she's happy. She's like, oh, great. Who'd you hire? And he says he hired Linda. But Betty finds out that Linda's never worked at a law office and she doesn't type. So she's not a paralegal. She has no legal experience. He's hiring a girl with no experience. And he has a huge caseload. So when she questions him, his motives for this, Dan tells her she's being crazy. Dan's like, you're crazy. You're being crazy. So Betty smells a rat, and she tells him, get rid of her or get out. Get rid of her or get out. Betty gives Dan until the end of the month to get rid of Linda. After a month, Betty calls the office and Linda answers. So he didn't get rid of Linda. So Betty hangs up the phone, and when Dan gets home from work, she confronts Dan. Why is Linda still there? And Dan tells her, this isn't your decision. I pay for your lifestyle. If anyone's getting out, it's you. This is, I guess, where you could start saying that Dan is starting to gaslight Betty. He didn't say, Betty, I'm unhappy and I have hired Linda and I might be attracted to her. I don't know. Maybe I should move out. He didn't acknowledge her emotions and her feelings. Respectfully tell her the truth at this point. Okay? Does that give her justification to kill him? Absolutely not. But just so you know, the people who want to build a case for gaslighting, say that he starts gaslighting her at this point, telling her she's absolutely nuts. If this is where your mind goes, you're just crazy. She wasn't crazy. She was accurate. He was interested in Linda, and he started an affair with his legal secretary. That's the facts. So we go on to episode 4. The psychiatrist for the defense is on the stand in the murder trial. He's a specialist in the study of infidelity and its impact. And he is going to break it down about how gaslighting occurs, how the history of gaslighting, and the whole 9 yards. So he talks about that on the stand. And then we flip to Linda and Dan falling in love. And I just want to gag, honestly. I think, personally, you should be honest and respect yourself and your partner enough to just be honest and leave a relationship rather than drag it out with cheating. It's ridiculous. Do people have slip-ups? Yeah, but then you're honest with the person the next day, You don't drag it on for 11 months or whatever. It's ridiculous. But anyway, Dan and Linda are shown falling in love. And the soundtrack to this is Like to Get to Know You Well. And you just want to gag at all them coy looks and he's coming in the office and going out. And she's like, oh, because we're back in time. She's the receptionist at the office pool, and they're falling in love by him strutting in and out of the office and then transferring calls and getting mail going back and forth. So this office romance, and you just want to barf, but it's Like to Get to Know You Well. It's playing behind it all. So Betty's questioning him. Are you sleeping with her? And Dan insists, I haven't, and I'm not. And this just goes on and on. You're crazy, you're crazy, you're crazy. So what does Betty do? She goes and she confides to her lunch bunch. Her La Jolla lunch bunch. And she's, they'll be talking about oh, how are you, Judy? How are you, Susan? Oh, and she, how are you, Betty? Oh, she just lays it flat out in the middle of the restaurant. I think Dan's banging his assistant, just like that. Slaps it out on the table. And what do they say? Oh, Dan's not like that. He would never do that. He's not a womanizer. He's not like that, So she doesn't even get her friends backing up what she's saying initially. So that could make you even feel more crazy. Allegedly, Dan is seen all around La Jolla as time goes on, taking her out to lunch in the whole 9 yards. So I think a lot of La Jolla knew about their affair as time went on. So meanwhile, Dan is buying a little red Corvette, and Linda is driving him to Long Beach to pick it up. And even when Dan and Betty do manage to get some time and take a vacation or squeeze in a date, Dan will steal away to call Linda on the phone, And again, it's not a cell phone, so he'll have to go find a landline, and call Linda. And so what does Betty do? She goes and buys books on midlife crises, how to nurse Dan through this midlife crisis that she's recognizing that he is having, even though he's denying everything. She's just crazy, you know what I mean? He needs to talk to Linda because there's a deposition, you know what I'm saying? You can see, I feel for Betty being angry. I feel for her anger. I don't feel for her inability to get perspective on the anger, all right? That part of it I don't feel for, but for her pure unassuaged, anger, yeah, I get it. So in the scene that, again, another one of the classic scenes for this case, Betty goes to surprise Dan on his birthday. And she gets all dolled up. She brings champagne to his office to celebrate, only to find The receptionist there and the office is empty, all right? And she's told that he's out with Linda and has been out since lunchtime. But the leftovers from a party is in his main office. Like, you've got champagne and cake and a mousse cake. And in the facts of the case, the series didn't mention this, but Betts allegedly found a half-empty bottle of wine and 2 wine glasses, just 2, from her own wedding china. From her own wedding china. Are you kidding me? That's like, okay, Dan might as well have banged Linda in her own bed. Don't have somebody that you're having an affair with drinking out of your wedding china. That is such bad karma. But I guess maybe he didn't believe in the church anymore, according to the series. I don't know. Hello, Satan. You know, I don't know. Anyway, so in Linda's office, there's a picture of Dan on the wall that Betty sees, right? Because now Betty's snooping around, right? So Betty waits until sunset to, can you imagine the fight if they had come back? Oh, there would have been a row. But anyway, Dan doesn't return. So Betty goes home and she burns his clothes. All these fancy tailored clothes. She gets them all in a big ass pile and she burns his clothes, and then she sits by the smoldering ruin. Yeah. So when he finally does bedraggle his ass home, she tells him, I moved you out. Poof, But he, of course, claims he's been in a deposition and that she's absolutely crazy, and she doesn't have any proof. So she backs it up. She ends up walking it back and doesn't kick his butt out. Okay, listen. If you guys own that property together and you're not gonna light anything else on fire like the neighborhood, you have every right to destroy that property. Have I ever destroyed anything? No. I think I'm too tight to destroy stuff like that. But yeah, you can legally destroy your own property all you want, and if it's marital property and you're not divorced, you can destroy the shit out of it. So what she did wasn't illegal. She tore his stuff up, and you know what he did? He just turned around and bought all new stuff. We flip back to the psychiatrist that's in court speaking about gaslighting and how it undermines one's sanity, and it undermined Betty's ability to trust herself. And he gives an example like, if I miss so many things about how life really is, how can I know anything at all? Like, how can you? If she missed so much about what he was really like, I mean, how could she really trust? And so we see Betty considering getting her tubal ligation undone, so to please Dan, because she was in the series talking about how, well, maybe if it'll make him feel younger to have a baby in the house. I mean, here she is getting ready to push 40, thinking about having a baby in the 80s to please Dan. So by September 1984, Dan and Linda allegedly have been in an 11-month-long affair. So think, that's 11 months of Dan telling Betty that she's crazy. That's a long time. And so Linda also allegedly, according to the series, was bragging around the office regarding the affair. So it wasn't such a huge secret, especially if like you're going on romantic dates and they're talking about it. So finally Linda feels bad, according to the series, and she cries to Dan that her family would be ashamed of the affair that she's having, Like, oh, Linda, go find yourself a man. And she can't admit that she's already been with a man, but that he's married and has 4 children. Now Dan realizes he's got to do something. Maybe he feels like Linda might leave him. You never know what his motive was to end the 11-month affair and make it a marriage, to divorce Betty and just to move on, Personally, I don't have a lot of respect for people that treat relationships like monkey bars. They don't let go of the one they're in until they've got the next one firmly in hand. If you love Linda and you're going to cheat on Betty, go ahead and make that move. Don't wait 11 damn months. That's just my opinion. So then we switch back to the therapist, the psychiatrist on the stand, saying that the infidel, being Dan, admitting and accepting remorse is necessary for the victim, which would be Betty, to move on. A necessary condition for change. In other words, it's gaslighting if someone is not only doing all these things, but they won't even admit it and they won't accept any remorse at all. and that it's necessary for Dan to come forth and say, look, yeah, I did this and I was doing it the whole time and I'm really sorry. But you're not going to get change in a gaslit situation unless you have that. And that's what he was trying to say. Betty's response to Dan's gaslighting was to light a flame of her own. She lit a flame of her own. Meanwhile, Dan is strategizing how best to divorce Betts and is talking about making a $140,000 down payment being made for Betts's home in La Jolla. Mind you, this is the home that she thinks they're buying for the lot and that they're going to tear down and build a big ass house on it. So he's talking about giving Betts $140,000 as a down payment. So under California law, it's called in the case of Epstein. So it's the Epstein case, and they call them Epstein credits. For a spouse who uses separate property to pay pre-existing community debt can be reimbursed out of community property. So, such as when a spouse makes a down payment on a house he never intends to live in. If he can prove due to the date of the separation, the intent, the D-Day, you could call it, the date of separation, and one spouse, at least one spouse, has the intent to separate. If you can use that D-Day, then every single thing that you paid for can be reimbursed out of community property. Do you understand the implication of that? So Dan's lawyer advised at the end of this strategy meeting, the strategy session, that, quote, so after like he says all these ways of Dan to best screw Betts, he says, it never hurts to think about how you'd want to be told. Like, tell her nice. Like about the separation, because she has no idea that this is coming. This D-Day, the separation. The D-Day was February 25th, 1985, and Dan springs it on Betty late one night when she's in bed, and he tells her, I need time to think, and he needs some space. Don't you love that? It's not, I'm not in love with you, I'm banging the office assistant. It's, oh, I need space, you know? So it's still gaslighting. It's still like you really don't know, you're in a fog, like you need space, you know, it's just, anyway. While Dan is maneuvering Betty into the new house, it's not new, it's that tear down house in La Jolla, which, you know, where they were going to build a house on, he moves back to the Coral Reef house, the family home. I just want to add this bit. She is going to go on a whole bunch of rants and rampages and rages. And a lot of this stuff is directed at that marital home and the assets in the marital home. Is it horrible? Yes. Is it outrageous? Yes. But a lot of her rampages and tears are focused on that, on the marital community property, which would be legal. Now, if she goes in and starts tearing up his Marston Hill homes that he buys later, that wouldn't be cool. That wouldn't be kosher. But until there's an order that she's not allowed on the property, she could tear up her own community property to her heart's content, and she does it. So, FYI, Dan has now told her he needs space. He maneuvers her into the La Jolla property, and he eventually, there's a part that they don't go into in the series where they have a rental place because of a slab crack or whatever. But long story short, just to make it easy, he gets back in the marital home, and that makes it easier for her to go on these rampages because she's got the keys to it. You know what I'm saying? So this is how that goes down. She's going back and raging and ranting and tearing stuff up, and she gets ticked off and she drops off the kids thinking, you know, at Dan's, thinking that they're going to cramp his style and that he could see what it's like to raise a family by himself. You know, you need space? Here, have these 4 freaking kids and see how easy it is to take care of them. So that was her mindset when she dropped the kids off with him. It wasn't that she didn't really want to be a parent. She didn't love him anymore. She just wanted to cramp his damn style. She's using the kids as a pawn, but so does he, in my opinion. So on September 23rd, 1985, by this time Dan has the kids and he's handing Betty checks. So he's got the bifurcated proceeding, he's got the kids, he's got the custody, he's got, the assets judged to the amount that his accountant says they are, and he's handing Betty voluntary support checks. So he's doling her out $9,000 a month. And we're told that half of that is for her mortgage, the one at the house that's supposed to be the damn teardown, and half will be covering all her other expenses. So he's in total control.